Thank you, Nicola, for this very deep presentation. I think you're right. You are mentioning Brazil, but interrogate deeply our research, whether we are working in India or in France. Now we can take some few questions, maybe two, three questions, and then you can respond in group. It's fine with you?
It depends the question.
Okay, you're right. So you choose. So please.
So I actually have two questions. So maybe you can just. So one is actually just clarification. So I didn't fully understand the situation between the church and the tenants in the Quilombo. So you said that neither had a proper title, but it wasn't. It's not as if it was squatting. It was actually being rented out. So there was some informal understanding that the church owned the property, but without the title. Is that sort of how it?
Yeah, they own the properties and they have no title, but they have a contract of renting, of course.
Okay, but but how is it But there's just a larger. Is it an understanding that has police force behind? I mean, what is the right? So what we might normally think about in India is the moment that happens, they're just going to squat on the tenant is going to squat on the land. So what is the how is it enforced? What is the process there? How is there an informal understanding that the church owns the land without a title?
So the church owns the land because it's they claim it's an heritage from the colonial times. So they say have been gifted of the land, and then they built it houses. They were renting officially to poor families living in the neighborhood. They suddenly increased the price 3 times. So the families were in process of eviction. But these families didn't know. There were no evidence of ownership. Of course, they would have challenged that. They didn't know.
So there just was no common understanding that this was the situation. So once the legal issues came about, then people realized it.
Yeah, but the families, they didn't realize because they were not in the dispute of the federal court.
So now the other question I have is about the thesis, which is that are you working under the assumption that heritage is only being used in a progressive sense, right? I mean, so one can think about defense of heritage. I assume you're not, right? What if for clarity, basically. But, one can think about heritage obviously being used in very conservative ways. Protecting a colonial past, protecting a certain ethnic group against migration, protecting, right? So what are the parameters that one needs to put around heritage in the public space, or as sort of thinking about social conflict that will allow us to get away from some of the worst interpretations of it?
Okay, thank you for the question. May I just go now? No, go out. No, no. Of course, this case study is by chance a way. I'm just trying to follow, but then there is some implicit I hide it from you, or maybe I just passed through. We can revert the way we look at it. I said that only the Valongo wharf, only the slave has been excavated, has been promoted. The Imperatrice heritage track is forgotten by archaeological. Any archaeological movement, they just don't care about it. Who cares? Who would have care? Is the municipality. If there were no slaves here, they will how you say in French, faire du feu, feu de tout bois, faire feu de tout bois. They just had the opportunity to silence the protest, racialized question, very sensitive, because they found that. If they had found another thing like another church, they would have protected as heritage also. But it was very hazardous, but they were very lucky because they could promote and present themselves as promoters of the African heritage. They were negating, they were denying since now. And what I didn't say, they did really nearby. They did this new Porto Maravilha. Porto Maravilha is the name of the urban operation. It's my my Porto Maravilha. That was a place of implementing participative democracy under the urban operation, where people could express themselves about this. Oh, I like this, I don't like that. Oh, you did this like that. And the people of a place of free expression nearby the heritage place. So, that was the heritage happened to be in the middle of the urban operation. But for a long time, and I'm sure without any movement of archaeologists and academics and activists, these archaeological evidences would have been forgotten by municipality because it was very easy. And there was a fight at the moment within the municipality to debate about this. No, we don't want that. Just don't call the press, please. And we have to go. The emergency of the urban operation implementation was going on. So, did it answer? And the second question is how to define heritage. And in that sense, heritage is defined as people defining. Whenever, whoever is defining it, appropriating it, whoever.
We're in a perpetual state of conflict in India, so we always say.
No, and I mean that's my point, because you can. I mean, either you are from within an institution who has a very clear perspective and norm of this is my criteria, and otherwise. People considering an attachment or an identification to a tangible or intangible element could be considered as a place of strategy of appropriation, a place of conflict. And so that's the way I want to address it, which is very difficult because whenever you are participating to any debate, you say, this in Pondicherry, this Tamil house, what do you think about it? What is the criteria? I don't care about the Tamil house. I just care if it's an object of projection of a strategy, being destruction, being protection, being speculation. It's a way to avoid an impossible question, I think, of and between you and me, social backgrounds and social capital and culture and references, religion, okay, everything and nothing could be considered as.
So you may have, you may have, briefly mentioned this already, and I may not be clear about it. But what I wanted to understand was the individual claims of the settlers on that property. So, what was the nature of, you mentioned that they were squatters, but what was the nature of their kind of identification as people, because when the site becomes heritage notified, then obviously all goes through some other form of transformation. There are new interests who come in and, old interests who move out and all that. So what was the process?
The initial.
Sorry?
The initial ones.
Yeah, the initial ones. What was the process through which, were they identified, listed, something like that? And the process of transformation. So, they may have been ordinary squatters before, and the process in which this becomes a heritage site, what sort of effect did they have, what did it have on their individual claims?
Okay, basically, the category I couldn't address directly. The category of residents or tenants.
Sure.
There were like 100 people. Out of that, only 40 were active, very active. Out of that, only 5 were leaders. Leaders belonging to the black movement of Rio, which are not all of them black. This is Rio. This is Brazil. Black people. Black movement is made of is also led by white people. I would see as white people. And these 5 people, they were highly involved in the revitalization of the port area since a long time, assuming this African inheritance. There is a cemetery of ancient slaves 500 meters from there. They were active against in the late 90s, where Guggenheim Museum was to be built in the area. They actively denounced that, and so it's an identity movement who used the heritage asset of the site as a way to struggle against urban policies, schemes, since decades. And now it happened that they address this particular conflict because they found this place as very sensitive and very important, and it was very lucky, hazardous, like opportune at this time to go further with this claim. So being or not tenants, they used the category to say the residents claim for.
When you say 5, you mean actually 5 or 5%?
No, 5 out of 40, 5 people,
5.
local leaders. Local leaders acting as activists, mobilizing social movements, housing movements, and the 5 were going to the courts directly with advocacy and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the space became a kind of way to crystallize a number of movements which were larger than the site itself, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. This reminded me very closely of the case of Solidaire in Beirut. I don't know if you've heard of it, where Rafiq Hariri, which is the ex-prime minister, had a huge real estate company and was tasked with the reconstruction of the area along the Green Line that was destroyed in the Civil War. And what was fascinating the example came up when the slave period was uncovered, was during the bombing, an old Roman and Phoenician sarai where all the trading caravans would meet, was uncovered. And Rafiq Hariri used that as a way to professionally reconstruct Lebanese state identity, along with the whole real estate redevelopment outside. So the word that a lot of Lebanese activists use, though, is spectacle. So I was wondering, spectacle. Is the slave pier, it's kind of entered very kind of rationalized as a site of heritage. Is there something different between how that's been integrated into the heritage vis-a-vis, the neighborhood of I didn't remember the name of the neighborhood, but Pedra de Sol, which is perhaps a much more quotidian, lived heritage, right? So is that something is that a differentiation being used, because that's something that happened in Lebanon?
So what happened now, recently, there is a French anthropologist, he used to work on candomblé rituals, and now is shifting from Salvador de Bahia, where the candomblé is happening. He's shifting to Rio because of the revitalization of rituals of candomblé from the wharf, the slave wharf. He said that new rituals are performed associated with the memory of slaves. It was always present in the rituals because the religious rituals of candomblé are mixing hidden practices of animal sacrifice and tranza and all that, with some public performance of cleaning up places, churches. Even in Paris, they do that. Brazilian communities, La Madeleine, Église La Madeleine, they clean it up, the church and all that. And now they address direct new rituals in the Valongo Wharf, addressing directly to the ancient slaves and make them speak, as antepast. So it means that it's so the municipality is very much interested in that, because it's the significance that the current movement is a lived heritage, because it's a lived culture. Okay, it's always reproduced, and they could easily respond that it's not a farce, it's not factice. It's a real, always living way to rebuild new expressions in space.
I guess my question was there in any way either the municipality or the company in charge of the urban transformation rationalizing the heritage as part of a selling point? Right? The same way the church did. These companies also, the professionals coming in that were setting up these spaces as sites of, either public spheres for certain kind of people to come and engage.
So I did understand your question. Maybe I missed my reply, but they rationalize, they organize shows of that, but using always the culture, the spiritual references of the candomblé officials, because they are the legitimated, and they could sell them as a show. So this person do public rituals in public with tourists. That's the only way they can sell it, the place, because it's a public space.
What you're saying is some form of informal negotiation, actually, to heritage.
Yeah, it's also a way to the Valongo Wharf. Jérôme Souti is having this very interesting work on how this heritage place, marketed in urban, very common, has a special resonance in the contemporary claims for religious renewal. And the municipality called the institutions of the candomblé rituals, who were never called, always put in periphery, in the center of Rio, because they, to say, you succeed in appropriating the place, and now let's dance, in the port, in the gentrified port. So it's a way, it's a mix.
No. This is very different from the Lebanese case, right? Where it was
Because I've been there in this place. It's like it could be in San Francisco, it could be anywhere.
the Rafa Maneo
Yeah.
mall and stuff.
But definitely, I think there is something maybe could happen in India. Yeah.
Because 2009, 2016 Olympics, was engineering space.
Yeah.
The sense of what exactly happened.
So it would involve a long time, but I would try to make it short. But the port of Rio was always in the center of the urban policy. They wanted to revitalize it since Rio lost its capital. It was capital of the country, and then in the 80s, the economic crisis, the port definitely declined. Since then, there was a succession of public intervention trying to get it. But how they succeed was in two ways. First is an adequation of powers, alignment of powers between federal, state level and municipal level. All of from Petit, Lula da Silva, and the mayor and the state representative they were all from Labour Party. So they were the most important landowners of the port zone. So they could settle a dispositif, which was this kind of Bombay kind of thing. Instead, by using this, I will miss vocabulary because épargne salariale. The salary, the taxes an employee put aside and can use at the end of his, not a retirement pension.
It's like a provident fund.
Providence fund, administrated by a federal bank. So the municipality and the federal state use this money to acquire the whole land and settle what they call CPR, additional CPR, certificate of additional building. It means the land use. Yeah, it's a São Paulo technique applied in Rio in a higher scale. So the person acquiring the land can buy certificates to build further. So it means that they could highly densify. The problem, this was one, and taking advantage of the dynamics since 2007 of mega event organization, Paralympics, Olympic Games in Latin America, even the Pope celebration, Journée mondiale de la jeunesse, JMJ, Christian Youth Mondial event in 2013, big event. 2014 Football World Cup, 2016 Olympic Games, 2015 Paralympic Games, 2016. So then they had a urban policy towards mega event organization, justifying this operation of attracting Forbes, Trump Tower, and all that. Trump Tower at the last minute didn't invest. But then the idea was to make a port as a model, San Francisco model, Lisbon model, and all that. That was the basic idea, revitalizing heritage to re-attract people who are not middle class, who are not living and working in the city center, to re-densify the center. So that was the main. Through infrastructure, metro, tramway, VLT, tramway, VLT, light train, all this new infrastructure, power plants, and
Thank you very much, Nicolas. It was really interesting and very interesting to discover those two cases. I had two questions. One was a broad question and another one a precise one. How, after studying those two cases for a certain number of years, how do you think they've transformed the way from the government side to think about the place of culture in urban development? Does it set new model, or did it impact the government in its way to think its upcoming policy of the place of culture in urban development? That's my first question. And the second one was more particularly focusing on the, you mentioned the case of a museum of contemporary art. It seems to be in quite great contrast with the other project, and I wanted to know more about the reception, if there were conflicts, and where was it located, because this neighborhood looked very dense.
Mm-hmm.
So where was it located, and can you tell more about that?
I had a photo and it disappeared here, but I can show you. Yeah? No, I missed it. No, I think it's another. No, it's not. I show you after. So the first response is definitely no, for two reasons. I mean, it's a pity to say that, but the first is that the very preoccupation of the mayor, the anterior mayor, the one who launched the urban operation, he was very much involved in hiding the favelas and all the popular neighborhoods from the international marketing public. By applying clearly this famous question of risk, using the risk to evict as the only way to evict popular neighborhoods, and he was very, very good into maquillage, hiding popular neighborhoods, going to Google, asking Google to avoid, to delete any reference of Morro or favela in Google Maps.
Wow, really?
Yeah. From 2010, 11, 12, the Google cancelled that, and any reference to Morro, which means hill, or to favela, was disappearing from the Google Maps. Yeah. So he was very radical in that sense, and he was very keen on big investment and hoping, as they were in Bombay for a long time, attracting big real estate companies and that. But then, as the project were advancing, they noted that no major investor was there. Only infrastructure could be addressed, but with many difficulties. So the 2 or 3 major museums were made. It doesn't mean they had any idea of kind of cultural trail, cultural agenda, cultural cluster, or any sense of strategy. Especially because as this happened in 2014 and then 15, the mayor changed. And who was the mayor of Rio is the evangelist priest, ex-federal deputy, very much involved into local politics. You could say like the more religious of the deputy you can have in the world, not any sentence without any discourse without saying it's a sin or be careful because then God will punish you or something like that. In a very aggressive way, in a city which is the more progressive with São Paulo, and where people are religious Catholic and have a mixed identity, religious identity, but without any. So then, any reference to culture is for him out of question to talk about, especially because this museum is a contemporary art museum, and it's highly conflictive in the sense of many activists from there denied to enter for a long time. But the museum has a curator coming from Sao Paulo, very clever, saying, we are here for you, to exhibit you and to let you perform in. You are the reason of this museum. As they did in Raval in Barcelona. We say, the museum is made to be a testimony of the urban changing landscape, which is very cynical because they contributed to destroy some houses, to evict people, but then they were integrated that. And one of my closest friend, my fixer, you can anthropologist say, he's an artist from the favela, he's a photographer. For 10 years, he was criticizing that, and now he got some money, he got some funding from the institution. Of course, you know, he was hardly surviving, and then the museum is here to... Then the museum is a popular contemporary art museum of the neighborhood, embedded in the neighborhood, anchored in the social ties. So the debate is there between outside and insiders. Also, but most of the people from within, they just don't even mention the existence, don't even have a conscience of this, what is it about. But the activists are stuck. They are integrated into the system they wanted to fight. This is what Michael Hart and Antonio Negri said. The empire is integrating till everything and at its own contradiction, own contestation.
Yes, I have three. No, two.
Three and cynical and perverse questions.
No, the first one is a clarification, and to try to understand what you were saying, I did not understand everything, is to try to make parallels in my head. So I was thinking your case of these ethnic territories, which has legal standing, if I understand it correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that if I can prove that I am an ethnic minority, I mean, according to the definition of Brazilian law, I have the rights on the land, right?
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. Constitutionally, yes.
Right. So somehow, is it something like in India, let's say you have the Forest Act that gives the right to the forest dwellers for that if we apply this totally in the urban setup, for instance, the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, in which we work together, then these people could claim that land very clearly, right?
Yeah.
Is it that?
Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe some minority groups claiming. So it's a legal rights.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's clear.
But
so then,
what is not clear is the way to implement it.
Yeah.
Because then and the proof.
Yes.
Who are
the
you?
manner in
You,
which
as you know, Brazil doesn't have any minority identification, as you don't say tribes or scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, and all that. It doesn't exist. So then it's auto recognition as an Adivasi. You can say, or as and then the Quilombo is especially attested by the history of being a place where independent slaves or emancipated slaves were escaping from their ex-owner and living a collective life with collective use of the land. So then the constitutional right try to guarantee the possibility of this existing here in the rural area. This is very common and is a proliferation of claims. But now, starting the conflict in the urban context.
It's bringing the commons to the urban. It's the question of the urban commons somehow.
Yes.
So then it leads to my second question. As you know, I like to simplify always. So what I understand of your case studies is that there are two very different logics. One is to recognize this urban common, material, the land, collective use of land, as well as symbolic, right? I mean, the around question of heritage, memory, etc. At the same time, on the same territory, you have a very individual logic, which is the urban operation, which is actually totally based on property rights and building up And these two logics are happening at the same time, have some form of legitimacy, right? Political legitimacy and legal legitimacy. How do you explain that these two logics can actually happen at the same time? Because is it that they are somehow supported by two different actors? For instance, the court in one case, the politics, urban politics on the other, or I mean, you know, what are the forces behind these two logics? Because they coexist, even though they seem to refer to very different perception of what can be the territory, that space in the city. Okay. My last question is. Let me finish my question. Is that I think you did not answer your main question at the beginning, which was the story of these political leaders. You said, how can I, you started with that, right? You never came back to it.
No.
So I want you to come back to it.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether the answer is
the trajectory, you say, individual.
Yes, because is it what you were answering to Nilanjan? Somehow you said that, yeah, you said I want to follow these guys because they start from slum dwellers and then they somehow come out, or they escape, Purcell says they escape the local trap, right?
Yeah.
So is it because of this idea of what you're saying, trying to combine different social groups or social movement together, or we don't see them very well in your story, and we don't understand neither who they are and why you raised this question in the beginning, because it's
okay. Can I
now that's
answer to the last one first?
You choose.
So yeah. No, I mentioned the thing of the thing that I was following activists or local leaders in their way to politics, and that's where I met this case study. That's where I entered in this case study. Maybe it was not very.
So what were they doing in these case studies, these guys?
So they were involved in the advocacy of the claims of identity movements. Not all of them. So, of course, I didn't detail each and every one because there were 6. And I didn't write about them. I didn't finish to write about them. I had interviews since 2005. I have, for 5 of them, I have like 10 hours of interviews of each, and I still have to formalize that. That was the purpose of the book we were to do with the research program Inverse with Claire Hanol. And we didn't finish. We never finished. But this is the way I wanted to say that I would have stayed in the favela because it was very interesting to follow up a 10 years evolution of the city, of the neighborhood towards politics. You know. But then I had to go out because they were involved in other claims from outside. You know, and that's why. The second thing is that maybe I was not very clear, but there are not only two opposition, two different superposed or entangled situations. One, the claim, and second, the urban strategy. The thing is that the urban strategy has been for long going on, and then at a certain moment, in 2009, it accelerated. It was activated. And then it happened at the same time when identity movement was rescaled because they found the excavation wharf. And then what happened is the third kind of movement of political games came from police forces, trafficking, local other leaders, politicians discovered this place as a place to be because cultural economy. That's where municipality and identity movement meet. These places where people are coming and dance. That's where the religious part, the cultural part, and the urban trends are meeting. Everybody's happy, but that's why I said this is a kind of we can say it's a gentrified place, evening, etc. But then gentrifying is not what municipality was dreaming, because it's full of policemen, it's corrupted policemen, it's full of guns, it's full of drugs, and it's full of tensions that could destroy the event. So it's very fragile. Is it clear?
It wasn't my question, but it's okay.
No, but you say how they meet.
No,
it's
because
not an opposition.
yeah,
How they
that
could
is
happen
what
together.
you're talking about here is more the outcomes of what was imagined as an urban project that would integrate different logics.
It was not imagined. It happened because of identity movement and because they found a new heritage asset as the Valongo Wharf. Then it happened. Then municipalities say, oh, we wanted to fight against the emergence of identity movement of a very tiny minority. Right. We are not for African heritage because then tomorrow native Indian American heritage asset will be formulated and we will have to respond to that. And they were not ready to do that. They destroyed the Museum of Native American when they organized World Cup. They destroyed it. So they were not happy. But it happened because it was a way to silence the protest.
Right.
Does it answer?
Yes.
Please use the mic.
Just have another question following the one of Marie-Hélène between the timings. As you said, you follow the law timings. One law was issued towards this space, another one. But it seems that the space is not only the question, the time is also the question, that you didn't focus so much on your research. And even when you say that you want to analyze the biodata of these people that you met on the favelas, maybe the timing where these people are staying in the space, using the space, must be very interesting according to law. Are they allowed to stay, and for how long? And what about the police? What about the drugs dealers and everything? I think there is a perspective on time which is slightly missing to make it understandable. I don't know.
Okay, so first, of course, this is a reconstruction because I took the case, I should say, with a friend which is a lawyer and another from she's an ethnographer, and so I was very fast on that because our interests met. I've been working with Rafael Suarez since a long time. He's my main partner in the field, and as he did a really huge work on the urban law, you can say, and the construction of the favela object in the Brazilian law. And so we met around this case because he had always wanted to address it in an anthropological way of law, using that. And I was very much interested in that. And then we met an ethnographer. We did a MA work of a few months. Then we started to meet our investigations and to prolong it. So it, of course, in terms of timeline, it's reconstructed because we took the thing in 2008, 9, and it was happening since the early 90s.
Okay.
So we had to go back.
But you have also to go further.
But then we went further, and we stopped in observing this place in 2016 myself.
Okay.
But also the time and is very interesting, and I try now to draw to create a tool which can address both longitudinal trajectories of these local leaders, cut crossing with the context.
Okay.
And I don't know how to do that. I mean, I do a timeline and then another timeline, and it's not a very important timeline because started in 2005, but still the context changed. And of course the behavior of the local leaders, they change a lot. And I have a lot of material crossing these two things.
So I think you can find these mathematics, what you call the geometrical descriptives, which was used in architecture before, like two maps like that, moving like that with some lighting. And you can use it with what you call the software. They use the clouds, and you can use to put some data in clouds, and then you will get your image. Some people are using it for some definitions. Maybe you can use that.
we have other questions? Yeah.
I just want to look at an outcome because you've done this study over a period of 10 years.
You've done this study over a period of 10 years, and maybe you've observed it from a very complex set of parameters under which you studied this. What I'm interested in looking is that, looking at from the point of view of the municipality, has anything changed within the perspective of how they view the favelas? Because here you have historicity, you have public events. What about the other ones in Rio? Is the attitude similar, or do they have a different perspective on all of them? And what strategy do they evolve?
Okay. So this is a tiny part of my work, but as a public policies toward the question of slum is concerned in Rio, it has been fluctuating a lot, and it's been already fluctuating. Of course, there are some kind of mark points, landmark. When in the 90s, slowly in-situ rehabilitation was to be addressed, but the favela treated here enhancing cultural significance and things like that are very tiny, very few. Most of the favela are till today, and most of on top of it today, evicted. Silent, people are silent, discriminated, and I should say now there is no more public policy towards slum in Brazil now. The situation of the country since a few months and since few years, I should say, avoid any progressive issue you could observe in the early 2000, and I think we are more in a regressive way on that. After mega event, everybody was talking about the legacy of the Olympic Games. They're starting to address this question in Paris after London and all that. And then I've been assisting before Olympic Games in Rio on a person who was showing the legacy of Athens, and the public policy didn't want to know anything about it. And so then they stopped addressing the question of the favela since 2014. I mean, no, it was a timeline very alternating according to the public, the authorities, and now it's fully regressive from state level to This is a kind of exception, which doesn't solve the solution, but then the more centrally located popular neighborhood is to be integrated into the urban dominant forces.
I was also interested maybe in the gentrification process, but that's a long story.
Okay, thank you everyone for participating in this workshop. Thank you, Nicolas, for coming, especially from Pondicherry, to present this brilliant research.